So the information provided is for educational purposes and is not intended as medical advice or a substitute for medical advice of a physician or other qualified healthcare professional. We do not aim to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any illness or disease, and you should always consult with a doctor or other healthcare professional for medical advice or information about diagnosis and treatment. The information in this presentation has not been evaluated by the FDA or any other medical body. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Dr. Doreen Narbo, and I'm your host on today's call. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a clinical researcher and an author of several books. So welcome to our Tuesday call with Clayton Thomas, who is the founder of Root. Clayton has over 25 years of experience in the health and wellness industry. And for the past 16 years, he's been focused on detoxification and supplementation formulas. A simple philosophy, cure the cause. Hello, Clayton, and welcome to our Tuesday call.
Happy Tuesday. So the question is, what's the subject?
Well, last week we had our little talk about back to basics. And so today we're going to go back to heavy metals. We're going to talk about antimony. But first we're going to go ahead and recap last week's call. Back to basics. So last week we talked about going back to basics and we discussed the foundational products. We will be putting this on the YouTube shortly. So you can go and look at it there if you missed it last week. So we discussed clean slate, restore, and zero in. And we also talked a little bit about this QNet, the quantum nano emulsion technology. We also discussed the air pollution, why we need these products, why it's important because of the air pollution, the water pollution, the heavy metals, the glyphosate. We discussed liver detoxification, along with the cytochrome P450, which is really important to understand. And we've also talked about this on another presentation when we talked about vitamin D and how essential that is. And then we went over this diagram here that we put together. All these things here are actually on the YouTube, the Root brand channel. And we have discussed these issues in great detail. At least I think each of those calls are probably about an hour long. And they go over all of these things. So say, for example, in fluoride, these are all the things here in fluoride that we discussed, all of these things here. For air pollution, EMFs, we had big calls on that. Autism, which is an excellent talk that we did here, and along with Dr. Rao as well. And then we also discussed that it takes 120 days for cellular renewal. And that things take time. Also, we talked about restore and the synergy of restore. And if you look at this slide here, you'll see how the synergy works between these ingredients. And then we also discussed root comparison, which basically, the outcomes speak for themselves. There really is no comparison. We do stand alone. Also discussed how to research, because a lot of people keep asking, what about this disease? What about that, this and that, and all these things. But so what we want you to do is we want to empower you. We want to teach you how to do your research, how to look at these things, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your disease process is. It's all about the toxicity level that you have and the way your cells and your epigenetics are actually expressing itself. So that's why it's important to, look at the research. You can it's about getting to the cause, the root cause. That's the issue. So we looked at Google search. Most people can go on Google search and do this. I showed you the news tabs because it's really interesting to look at the news, and do the same search. And you can change these search functions. Like instead of heart disease, you can put cardiovascular disease or something like that. You could just change the parameters of what you want to search for. So these are just different areas that you can go and look for, that you can search on. I love PubMed. It's really good. If you guys are familiar with writing papers, you can use EndNote, which is fabulous. I have amassed so much information from EndNote. This is a really good tool that we use as researchers. We use EndNote a lot. So here's the periodic table. And I know that we've actually talked about some of these other metals in combination with other metals, but these metals here, we've actually had separate talks. Again, you can find that on the YouTube channel at the Root Brand channel. I don't know why I screw that up. Sorry. Okay, so so here's aluminum, cadmium, mercury, lead, arsenic. These are the big bad boys. But I thought, okay, let's look at antimony, because this is a really interesting one. We actually have some people that are taking the product that are currently involved in some litigation for antimony poisoning. So I thought we would talk about this today. So antimony is a semi-metallic chemical element which can exist in two forms. The metallic form is bright, silvery, hard, and brittle, and the non-metallic form is a gray powder. The word origin, antimony, was named after the Greek word anti and monas to mean a metal not found alone. So the chemical symbol is SB. It comes from an element's historical name, and it is a poor conductor of heat and electricity, and the metal and its compound forms can be toxic, as we'll see later. And this is a really interesting slide, because you can see that this is the antimony market is huge, and it's being used all over the world, and it's just getting bigger. They're using this more and more, but they have to combine it with other properties. So if we look through history, antimony was imported from the East, was used as eye paste in ancient Egypt, and the decorative eye paste has been found in the Nile Valley that dates back more than 4,000 years. So ancient Egyptian doctors recommended the use of this makeup to reflect the rays of the sun and to keep the insects away. Kind of reminded me of football players, where they put the black there. So today, kohl is a widely used traditional cosmetic. It is mainly worn around the eyes in Asia, Africa, Middle East. It's also a source of lead poisoning. And it's widely believed that it consists of antimony, which I love that eyeliner. I love that color. I actually used it today on my own eyes.
I did not.
And look, Queen Jezebel. The most famous user is the temptress Jezebel, whose exploits are recorded in the Bible. The Old Testament tells that Queen Jezebel used the naturally occurring sulfide of antimony to beautify her eyes. She actually would, put it on her eyes. Well, this was an interesting story. So in the Middle Ages, the detox protocol was antimony. And antimony was used to cure the body of all ailments, and was found to be an excellent way of evacuating the body. And not only through the rear portals, but all possible exit orifices would be in urgent use to violently expel its contents. Because it was made out of metal and remained intact, it was recommended to retrieve and save the pill for another detox. So back in the late 18th century, Mozart came down with a mysterious illness, and he was treated with tartrate, which is an antimony tartrate. And his cause of death was unknown. However, his symptoms were of intense vomiting, fever, swollen abdomen, swollen limbs, and consistent with antimony poisoning, and died within 2 weeks. So back during this time, during this period of between 1780 and 1850, this was the age of heroic medicine. Educated professional physicians aggressively practiced heroic medicine. And what that included was bloodletting, intestinal purging, vomiting, and profuse sweating, diphoretics and blistering. So physicians originally treated disease like syphilis with salves made from mercury. And these medical treatments were well-intentioned, but often well accepted by the medical community, but were actually harmful to patients. Like back then, can you imagine?
Who knew?
So in commercial production and uses, high grade or enriched antimony trisulfides react directly with scrap iron in a molten state, and it liberates the antimony metal. So antimony was particularly valuable in the day before computers in the printing press, known as typesetting or type metal. And I actually remember this. I was telling Claire, I remember actually doing it. Like actually I had a typesetting kit that I would actually put the letters in the line. Okay, that shouldn't date me like to my age or anything like that, but you know, we did have it back in the day. Okay, so.
Which wasn't long ago, really, because of the compression of time. That was only like 20 years ago.
Yeah, right. So anyways, so this combination of alloys, it was a combination of alloys of lead, tin, and antimony. This increased the hardness of the type and gave it a very sharp definition. And so antimony actually imparts strength and hardness to other metals, in particular lead, forming alloys used in automobile storage batteries. It's used in bullets. It's in coverings for cables and in chemical equipment such as tanks, pipes, and pumps. And it's the highly purified antimony is used in semiconductors, diodes, and infrared detectors. Combined with tin, lead, and copper, antimony forms an anti-friction alloy called Babbitt metals, which is used in machine bearings. It's also combined with another form of alloy known as Britannium metal and pewter, and it was used in utensils and teapots. So all those old teapots, you should probably not be drinking out of them. And so, and then antimony is also used as an alloy in solder. Okay, so antimony compounds, especially the trioxides, are widely used as flame retardants in paints, plastics, rubbers, and textiles. And several other antimony compounds are used, paint pigments. It's used in the textile industry because it helps to bind the dyes to the fabrics. Now, this I think was really interesting because this was a study back in the, I believe it was back in the 90s, early 90s, where they were looking at the antimony leaching from the cot mattresses during this time when sudden infant death was on the rise. So researchers investigated this polyvinyl chloride mattresses that was found in like many of these SID cases. And they thought that this was a possible cause of death due to antimony. And they measured the body fluids leaching antimony from the polyvinyl chloride. However, the data did not support the assumption of postmortem analysis. However, in another study, researchers found that antimony was in the liver, in the brain, and the urine, noting that the study does not support or suggest that antimony played any causal role in the death from SIDS.
Well, and you'd have to ask the question on who funded the study.
Yes, but something else that was really interesting was that postnatal exposure, right, to antimony gave rise to elevated levels in the hair samples of healthy infants. And another factor to consider is that toxic gases produced by mold growth within a baby's mattress. So mold growth is caused by liquids, spilt liquids such as milk, juice, urine that actually spilled, and also stuffed animals. And since the 1950s, the government has mandated that there be fire retardant chemicals, such as phosphorus, arsenic, antimony added to the mattresses, so that, and then when the mold begins to feed on the wet mattress material, it releases the toxic gas through the sheets for the infants to inhale. So I thought that was really interesting.
Amazing when you start getting into details and you look at the level of environmental exposure that we have at all levels of life and how dark it can really get. But then we get into bullets.
Oh, yes, bullets. Yes, definitely bullets. So here, antimony is an occupational hazard. It's, a lot of occupational exposure to antimony occurs mainly in workers involved in industry producing antimony trioxide, metal mining, smelting, refinery, coal fired power plants, refuge incineration, those working in indoor firing ranges. So you guys playing with your guns and your bullets, you better be on a clean slate.
Well, it brings up an interesting conversation point as well for the military because of, for our special operations people as well as our military, the military in general, they expend a large amount of ammunition rounds in training. Some of them will go through 10,000 rounds a week. And one of the things that they're required to test for, for active duty now is lead toxicity, because they know the lead exposure from the bullets they're firing, it causes major problems. But the level of exposure to lead increases the likelihood of issues that come later on if you're in service. Like with Gulf War syndrome, you combine these two issues with lead and antimony with depleted uranium, which has been used in bullets, and the rest of the different environmental chemicals that our military has been exposed to, and you create this toxic soup that's been diagnosed as a multitude of things. But you have to look at the exposure of all of these different components. And we love bullets, especially here in Tennessee. We have many of them.
Okay. So of course there's inhalation exposure as well. And it's interesting because the absorption in the respiratory tract is the particle size is very, very small. So we have this. We also have, here's from respiratory effects from miners and smelters at risk for interstitial lung disease and other respiratory effects such as chronic bronchitis, emphysema, inactive tuberculosis, pleural adhesions, respiratory irritation. And then of course there's gastrointestinal effects, which we already talked about. And then it's also airborne as well. So skin lesions as well, dermal effects here. All types of little, dermatitis can be seen. And there's also reproductive effects as well. So 2/3 of rats exposed to it for 63 days, they failed to conceive. And then also there was the incidence of spontaneous abortions and disturbances in menstruation that were reported in women working in metallurgy plants, and as compared to the control group. And then of course it is there's genotoxic effect with your DNA. So there were several studies assessing the risk and oxidative damage in workers that were exposed to this heavy metal. So that's what I have for today.
What's interesting is I'm doing my analysis as we go. And so antimony is not considered a rare earth metal, but it is determined to be insanely important in industry because of all the points, Dory, you were hitting on. And one of the semiconductors, the bullets and manufacturing. What's interesting is if you know the rare earth metal market, the Chinese actually control the majority of the rare earths on the planet. And they've done it because of where their sources are. 92% of the antimony is actually controlled by the Chinese as well. But what's important in this conversation is if you understand the points of toxicity that Dory was doing an amazing job of hitting on, how do you get it out? Good thing that clinical research has proven that for like water purification, clinoptilolite is very effective at binding antimony. So your clean slate
is antimony.
Antimony. I'll get my pronunciation correct. Antimony.
I checked it out. That's how I know.
Yeah. And that's an important one. So the antimony, the little clean slate bottle will remediate it. So it's already solved.
It's interesting because you wouldn't even think about that.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. You don't even think about the fire retardant. I'm sure they're probably still using it. And like I said last week, hey, I want my baby's clothes. Carter label had it like, ooh, this one has fire retardant. I want my baby to have that. Right.
Because you don't know when you're going to throw your baby into a fire.
Yeah, and now I have my baby sleeping on a mattress with with heavy metal with fire retardant. Yeah, so it's just to show you what we're being exposed to. We have no idea. We really don't. I
Well,
mean,
I think it's so crucial that, and especially now over the last 20 months, we're going on 24 months now of the environmental issues that have been put upon us, that we're so myopic in how we really look at everything. We look at our exposure that is current. If, like you were touching on, of what we used to have in our environment that doesn't leave. And this is where the glyphosate conversation comes in, and the rest of the heavy metals and exposure to our environment is so crucial, that you can't just look at what you were exposed to today and say, this is my problem. No, it's everything that you've been exposed to in your entire life, every place you've gone. Like we got home last night. We had our house cleaners came, and we walked into the bedroom, and we thought there was a gas leak in the house. It was so bad. Christina's like, call the gas company. There's something wrong, because it smelled horrific. It smelled like there was a gas leak or something. And we're like, I'm trying to problem solve in the house. I'm going up, checking the vents and going through the house. And we sent a text message over to our housekeeper, and we're like, what happened in the bathroom in the bedroom? Because this is crazy. And she sent us a picture, and it looks like a blood splatter on the bathroom floor. And Christina's like, that's blood. I'm like, no, and it's not red wine because it's too thick. And then she's like, well, a bottle of nail polish fell off the counter, and it broke on the floor, and it just spread out. And she showed it on the tile, and I'm like, oh, they had to use an entire bottle of nail polish remover to get that up. And the off-gassing of all of that just poisoned the entire bathroom, the bedroom, and then they closed the doors. So when I was like, okay, we're opening the windows, I'm putting the air filter on and let this thing run. And we're like, oh, okay, we're not going to die too quickly. But you just don't understand your exposure, because you look at all those instances and you walk in and you're breathing, not understanding what you're walking into. You're like, well, that smells weird. Like, if it was something that was really noxious and really deadly, you're already dead, right? Because you're already inhaling it. But even knowing, oh man, I'm smelling that, I need to get out of the room, you're still exposed to it. Your body's going to have to deal with what you've been exposed to. So yeah, we really don't have a really good idea of what our true environmental exposure has been since we were conceived. And that's really the point of having clean slate as a foundation, that you really can't argue it. You're like, oh, well, what's the most important thing you should do for your health? Get the bad stuff out. And that's where, the foundation for root and our principles are addition by subtraction. You can't do anything until you start doing that. You don't have to get through the process in order to start doing other things, but you have to start that first. And that's where, the combination of restore with 0N are so crucial. But if you're not doing that, you're basically just throwing wood in your house, trying to rebuild while it's still on fire. It's not a good idea.
Well, I think we have some time to take some questions, and then we have to end right on time for our next call.
Yep. Birgit's talking about using Rush from a small bottle and when she's using the discotheques.
I don't even know what that is.
Happy 45th anniversary to
yes.
Birgit today. I mean, she's been exposing herself to toxic air in airplanes for 45 freaking years. Good thing she's better now than she was over the last 45 years. I think that's one thing I bet she could comment to, that she's probably feeling and functioning better now than she has. I'll give her the first 15 years, because she's only like 49 years old. So she started flying when she was 4. But over the last 30 years. I bet she's healthier now after a year and a half on clean slate and a little zero in and restore than she was the last 30 years of her career. See what she says.
I am in fact, and it's proven by all the doctors and all the tests that I am better, because we had those flight doctor tests every year, and my tests are much better than they ever were. And I got rid of my non-alcoholic fatty liver too.
It's not a bad deal.
Yep, yeah, everything becomes better. Just try it, guys and girls.
And you lost a lot of weight too.
That is right. And it's going down even more. I have this automatic scale that connects to my iPhone, and it shows me that I lost 1.4 kilos last week.
No kidding.
Look, did you notice her skin, how good it looked?
I know you guys are all battling together to see who has the best skin. And I'm sitting here, I was looking at myself last night because of work and stress. I'm like, oh, I have a pimple. I'm like, and this morning I was looking at washing my face and I was like, man, I got to be on camera with Claire today. So I need to step my game up. Man.
Clayton.
Nicole.
Hey, do you think that the people like the metal testers will recognize the word antimony if I ask to have that tested in my boyfriend?
You can actually, if you get a heavy metal test done, and we use Access Labs, which for everybody that's here very shortly, you'll be able to order the urine excretion analysis test for heavy metals from Access Labs through ISNS, the International Science Nutrition Society, and you'll actually be able to get them at a lower cost than what doctors charge for them. But antimony is one of the things that's tested.
Okay, awesome. Because he's going to be getting tested every 3 months. Since I had mentioned to the doctors, I said, I know what's wrong with him, and you're treating him for the wrong symptom and situation. And I had mentioned before to you that when his metal test came back before he started clean slate, his arsenic level was 67%, which is at a lethal level. So we are still going through the process, and he is now having some diarrhea, which is an indicator of it, excreting from his body. So
Yep.
now that I learn about antimony, was just wondering if I had mentioned that for his next test, if they knew what I was talking about.
It's all part of the process. It depends on the lab that they're using. I mean, if you use Access or doctor's data or full urine excretion analysis panels for heavy metals will include antimony, as well as some of the other all the other primary toxic heavy metals.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's free testing. And it is just like getting blood labs. So if it were to be paid, I would still like to get tested through the ISNN just to see the comparison.
Yeah. Well, and it's one thing to understand when you're doing labs. Jürgen was asking a question about blood work, and urine and blood are transportation mediums. Right. It's really, really important to understand this when you're doing analytical testing. And I've done this for a long time of working with people, and they want to look at the excretion of metals in urine. They vary every time you go to the bathroom, right? Because there's no set schedule for what your body's going to be eliminating, right? So you have a process that you get to go through. And using the excretion analysis of you measuring samples gives you a picture. It gives you a snapshot of that specific time of what your body's throwing, what's coming out. Blood, on the other hand, is something that can give you a perspective of acute or quite chronic exposure to heavy metals. But you have to understand that heavy metals, mercury, cadmium, arsenic, lead, aluminum, cesium, strontium, they're toxic. Your body will sequester them, or they will be sequestered, or they will find a way out of your bloodstream very, very quickly. And if you watch the interview I did with Will Davis on the YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
Will had the worst case of arsenic toxicity I've ever seen. His ex-wife tried to kill him with it, and she poisoned him slowly over a period of time, and then megadosed him, and it should have killed him, but he built up some tolerance to it. And when he went to the hospital, the doctors told him that he had every symptom of being arsenic poisoned, but they couldn't find it because arsenic is metabolized so quickly. You can do a blood test on someone 30 minutes later after exposure, or a day later, and you're not going to find it in their bloodstream because it's gone. So
Wow.
they'll have all the symptoms. And what's interesting is if you look at leukemia and lymphoma, the primary cause of leukemia and lymphoma is actually arsenic poisoning. So you can see the correlating factors, but a lot of times you can't identify it.
That's kind of like that drug, that GHB. I had that, somebody slipped me a Mickey, and my vehicle actually got seized, not impounded, it got seized, and I wasn't even driving. And I went to get myself a drug test to prove that I was, date rape drug. And they told me that they couldn't detect anything because it leaves your system within 72 hours.
Yeah, it metabolizes out so quickly. So it's the important part to understand. Well, we want to look at the analysis. A lot of the measurements are difficult, but there are ways of looking at the improvements, which is where we have to give thanks to Dr. Stefan Rao for his heart rate variability analysis and the analytics he has. And that's where we're moving with a lot of analysis within the root community of collaborating with other companies. Because if you've done any research on heart rate variability, there's Aura that has the rings, Whoop has bracelets. If you have an iWatch or a Samsung watch that are doing heart rate variability, and you hear the conversations about sleep patterns and all the marketing going beyond that, if you have those devices, watch what happens to your REM sleep and your sleep patterns when you're using the Trinity. We've already seen it. So let me see here.
Well, look at Birgit. I mean, she just posted here. I had arsenic and cobalt and strontium in my blood from flying.
Yeah, it's just
long, right?
exposure. Yeah, we got a couple minutes.
Mm-hmm.
There's one about how do we get test clean state against oxalate crystals? Would that be
so
possible?
the oxalates and such,
Yeah.
you'll see that start to flush out, and as your system starts to rebalance. So, and we've seen many instances of that. The improvements in kidney function, the improvements in liver function. The gout crystals are a fun one because, I've seen many instances of people start flushing crystals out of their feet and out of their skin as their body starts to clear stuff. So it's good times. So there was a question on phthalates and plastics and nanoplastics and microplastics. This is an issue that, from a humanitarian standpoint, I don't know if we really have a solution for. I don't think clean slate. Well, so phthalates are formally a -2 charge. And I bet the interesting part to this is going to be probably similar to hexavalent chromium. The point I would make is if you can clean up the metals, the other environmental toxins from your system, you clean up your liver, you clean up your kidneys the way that we're doing, because we already have that data. By getting everything else to work better, your detox pathways are going to be more effective. There's not enough data yet on phthalate, but we know phthalates are bad, but like the nanoplastics that are in the ocean because of everything being broken down, that are being loaded up in fish that we are either eating or the larger fish are eating, and that are killing whales and killing sharks and killing more predatory fish because it just builds up in that biomagnification of the ocean that we see. We honestly don't know yet. But with hexavalent chromium, what they did in Iran, because hexavalent chromium is also negatively charged, which makes it unique, and it's very deadly. You can watch the movie Aaron Brockovich and learn about it because it's really, really bad stuff. But in Iran, they actually have a big problem in their water supply with natural exposure to hexavalent chromium. And you want to geek out like me, you can quote that. But what they did is they took clinoptilolate and they basically loaded it. So they put some trace minerals and different stuff on the outside to change the charge a little bit to positive, or to make positive. So, and this is where clean slate's unique, because we're fracking the crystal instead of loading it per se as its larger structure for water treatment, which is what they're doing. We're making it for water treatment on the inside by fracking it, making it smaller and adding the trace minerals. You have some of those sodium binding sites, or calcium, magnesium, potassium, that then have a positive link on the outside instead of the negative charge of the crystal, which can bind to those things. But it's something that's really not well proven yet. So theoretically, could it work? Yes. Do we have any proof of it? No. And are we going to study it? Yeah, talk to me in about 5 years.
I mean, how would you even measure that?
I mean, you have to look at, I mean, one, it's a lab test initially, to say, okay, in vitro. So the interesting part with clinoptilolite, and this is why it's used in water filtration, has been, and if you look up the antimony research, and if you understand the properties of, see, Dory, my pronunciation was good. Clino is really unique for its binding probability or capabilities, right? It's this naturally negatively charged honeycomb cage structure that will absorb, so AB, inside the cage structure, inside the porous structure, but also adsorb AD, which is on the outside of the cage structure. It will grab onto and bind these things. And this is also why clean slate is loaded with the trace minerals, because of this very unique cationic exchange process of, you can add the good guys in, the lighter metals. And when Dory had the periodic table up, you can see how they're separated. The heavier toxic metals are in one area, the lighter good metals are in another area of the periodic table. So we load in the good guys. And what happens is this, you look at magnetic charge basically, and density and structural density. So you have this cage structure that's holding onto the lighter ones. When they come in contact with the heavier ones, it lets go of the lighter ones to grab onto the heavier ones, and it holds onto them and won't let go of them. So whether you're using it environmentally for water filtration and sewage filtration, which clinoptilolite's been used for centuries for this, the water filtration systems for municipalities actually use clinoptilolite. They use charcoal and they use Clino. Clino is more effective, but if you look at the big filtration tanks, they're loaded with clinoptilolite, rock basically, and charcoal that they mix in, that they use as a filter. Your fish tank does the same thing. So what makes it unique is it'll grab onto that stuff and hold onto it. So as we're putting clean slate in your body, it's like little green garbage trucks, right? I got to give Pierre Coleman the props for that. It's my boy that actually coined the phrase. So they're going to go in, they're going to grab onto what they can, and they won't let go of it. So then it allows your body to flush it out. The same thing works environmentally, that if you put this in the environment in our manner, you can't do this with clinoptilolite powder, right? Because if you mix enough clinoptilolite powder and water, clinoptilolite powder is actually one of the things that's used in concrete, because clinoptilolite holds water. Right? Zeolites, that's why they have their name. It's zeolithos, it's water rock. The original discovery or rediscovery in the 1500s was, I think it was a Nordic guy that was heating rocks and steam started to come out. So that's how it got its name. So that's why their ability to hold water inside that porous structure is the reason it's used in concrete. That's why concrete cures over such a long period of time, because the clinoptilolite that's in that concrete actually holds onto the water to create the structural density. Okay. So if you use it environmentally, it'll grab onto stuff and it just won't let go. Yeah, and it'll see the fun part with Clino, with it being a sodium aluminosilicate, if as it grabs onto stuff, or at least in the form that we turn it into, if we did this theoretically, you're basically going to create more sand, which is a good thing because it's silica. And it's going to hold on to all that stuff. So it's really unique. When you actually look at it, it's the only way to clean it up, because you have to understand where clinoptilolite came from. Clinoptilolite was born from volcanic eruptions mix. So the lava and ash mixing in lake beds and sea beds, which created these crystalline formations. So the same natural process that created the largest emission of toxic gases and heavy metals into the environment created the same process that created the solution for them. Makes sense, right?
Okay.
Like you're
Yeah.
like, it's homeopathy, it's intelligent design at its most macro scale.
Okay. Well, that was interesting.
Was that pretty good? I made all that up, Dory.
Very interesting.
I don't
We'll
believe you. Okay, so I think that's a wrap for today. I'm going to go ahead and turn our gallery view on so we can say good night, everyone. Goodbye, wherever you are. And we'll see you next week, Tuesday, same time, same place.
Good night. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Okay, all the
Bye.
best. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, I got to turn on gallery view. There we go. There's everybody. Bye,
See
y'all.
Bye.
Konnichiwa, my friends.
See you later. Bye-bye.